Hey guys, here's another question that I see quite a bit, um, and it's a valid question, but there's probably a little too much emphasis on it. I see a lot of back and forth, a lot of discussion. When you get a pair of gloves, should you enchant them with 15 agility or should you enchant them with 2% threat? And at this stage of the game, it's very easy to get those enchants. I mean, Era has been out for I think 4 or 5 years at this point. There's a lot of folks that have those enchants. Most guilds have at least one person that will have both of them. I think the threat enchant drops off of Twin Emperors and AQ40, and I don't really know where the 15 agility one comes from. Um, but they're not hard to get, and cost wise, they're fairly similar to one another, at least on my server. Um, but really, at the end of the day, you're just trying to figure out, or at least you should be trying to figure out, which one is the best enchant, which one is the best all around enchant, and which one is the best for my threat gloves, which one is the best for my mitigation gloves, or tier 3 or tier 2 or whatever the case may be, whatever raid tier that you're at. Um, if you're just starting out and you're an MC or you're an AQ, you're just doing the 20 mans, you probably don't really want to spend the money on the threat, um, the gold. I mean, it's really up to you, but the same logic is going to apply. So a lot of people are going to tell you to sim it out, because it depends on your gear, and that sort of is true, and at the same time, um, not a lot of people know how to sim, or this is a tank simulator. I don't know a ton of information about it. I don't really know how old it is or if it's kept up anymore. I have back tested this with historical logs from my own character, putting in my own information, and it is fairly accurate. So I do use it to compare pieces of gear. So for example, when I was still in BWL going into AQ40, I would use this to see how much of a threat difference will it be if I swap out my offhand with an AQR, ancient Karaji Ripper sword, for example. Excuse me. Or back when I didn't have quick strike ring, I would um, I had Band of Ikuria, and I would say, what would be the threat difference, by changing these pieces of gear out. So it can be useful for that, but I'm going to use it just to kind of show you how close these two enchants are. So um, this is kind of my current level of gear. This is what I wear on, about a third of the bosses in Nax. This is what I wear on pretty much every boss in AQ40 except for Twins, every boss in BWL, every boss in MC. So obviously you can change and put in your own gear, but the difference is probably going to be even smaller in the lower tiers of gear. So this is basically all 2.5 with some AQ40 and Nax gear mixed in. Thunder Fury, Hungering Cold, Slayer's Crest, Kiss the Spider, Boots of the Fallen Hero. So we are at 6% hit. I do not have world buffs selected, but I do have raid buffs selected. So here's the world buff section here. I don't have any of these selected. And I have run it with world buffs, and it basically is the same. So the 2% threat scales just as well as the 15 agi enchant. I've got my spec here, so Death Wish, Bloodthirst, and then I've got the points that I have in certain sets of gear, and then the 2.5 set bonus. The swing damage, this can change your incoming rate or your incoming damage for your rage pool, but it's really not going to make a huge difference. You just don't want this to be down at 0. This is usually the setting that I use, just to compare individual pieces of gear. So then you change all that, and then you hit the calc button, and then it will do the results, and then it will graph out the results. And this is basically just showing you your average threat, which is right in the middle. Obviously, this is going to depend on RNG, how long the fight is. I think I have the fight set for 60 seconds. Yeah. So the bottom one is kind of your worst possible case scenario, your worst performance. You get a bunch of parries, or you dodge a bunch and you're not getting enough rage, that sort of thing. And then the green would be the best case, and then the yellow is kind of, this is what the average would be. So down here it's saying here's your threat per second with this setup and these buffs. And right now I have, and I have my enchants set up, but I have threat on the gloves, Gauntlets of Annihilation. So my threat per second here is 1160. DPS is 547, which is probably about right. Damage taken per second, rage per second gained, rage per second spent, and then it's got your flurry uptime, crusader uptime, and rage uptime, that sort of thing, and it breaks it down by ability. So really the only number I really care about is my overall threat per second. So it says 1160. So all I'm going to do is change this to superior agility, and then I'm going to run it again. So we're at 1160. And this is now with the superior agility, we're at 1145. So it went down by 15. So 15 threat per second is not, in my opinion, is not a huge deal when you're doing over 1,000 threat per second. So, 15 threat per second at 100 threat per second would be quite a bit. That's 15%. At 1,000 threat per second, that's like less than 2%. So it's not a big swing either way. Now, 2% threat, and this is in this gear. I haven't really done it with all tier 3 or all mitigation, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But 2% threat is just, it only affects this number. So we didn't look at damage taken, but agility, you got to remember that agility, and for every 20 agility, you gain armor. I don't have the calculation in front of me right now. Let's see what it is. I think it's 2 armor per, 2 armor per point of agility. So for every 20 agility, you get 40 armor. Every 20 agility is 1% crit and 1% dodge. So if you look, so this is only 15 agility. It's not 20, but if you look over here, our crit is at 35, our dodge is at 20 and a half. So let's change this to threat and then watch it go down. So now it's at 34.2, so it went down, pretty close to a full percent. It's like 0.75 crit, and then the dodge went down. So your threat is going to be very slightly better, but your avoidance, so obviously the 2% threat makes up for that crit, but you're also lowering your avoidance. You just lost almost a full percent dodge, and it probably is a full percent dodge once you have world buffs and raid buffs on. But threat is the better threat enchant, technically speaking. So there's a couple things you can do about this. If you're having threat issues, I've never used 2% threat. I have had threat issues in the past when I was when my gear started falling slightly behind the raids that I was attending, and the way that I got around that was to use more consumes. So at the time, I was only getting Spirit of Zandalar and the Dragon Slayer buff. I wouldn't go to DMT every single week. I wouldn't go and get Rend. I wouldn't go and get Songflower every single time. So the first thing I did was I changed that behavior, and I went and started getting world buffs every single raid. And that made a massive difference. When I started getting Rend, that made a massive difference. So you can do that. Another thing you can do is you can use more consumes. So here's the consumes here. Your weapon stones, Juju power, Winterfall firewater, elixir of the mongoose is huge. That's a lot of crit right there. Spirit of Zanza, that's stamina, but putting on weapon stones and then doing the juju powers and the Winterfall fire, like this does make a difference. It's not as big of a difference as world buffs, but it does make a difference. If you don't, if you're in a guild that's just super laid back, nobody gets world buffs. I mean, if none of your DPS are getting world buffs, you're probably not going to have threat issues. If just one DPS warrior is sweaty in your guild and goes and gets all these world buffs, you are not going to be able to hold threat. You're just not. And the adding the threat enchant is probably. I mean, like we just looked at it. That you're adding, basically you're adding 1 to 2% more threat per second over the agility enchant. That's not going to save your threat. It's not going to it's not going to save aggro. So in my opinion, if you're considering putting threat on your gloves, you need to look somewhere else. I personally don't like this enchant because I don't like giving up the avoidance and the armor. And even though it is a small piece of armor, it's only 30 armor. I think the superior agility is a better enchant, and it's a more well-rounded enchant. And it's hard to get extra agility elsewhere. Like on your boots, your options are basically 7 agility, so you can't even get 15 agility on your boots. If this was 15 agility, I would probably take it over minor speed. I'm probably going to change it anyway because I almost always have either the Spirit of Zandalar, which increases your run speed already, or I have as a backup, it's not, I don't think it's in here in this sim, but there's the Zanza that increases your run speed. Run speed is huge in raids if you're trying to be as efficient as possible and clear as quickly as possible and make sure you're at the front of the pack as often as possible. It's nice to have that run speed, but it's also nice to have agility. Stamina, I only have this on my tier 3, but even then I think between these two they're pretty similar. Yeah, the threat enchant, it's I and another thing you can do, because I see, I've seen threads and discords where people are going back and forth about which one's better, and at the end of the day I don't think really, like you could argue that threat is better and I can argue that agility is better. I mean, they're both pretty similar. Go get a second pair of gloves. Like, you're probably not going to get 2 Gauntlets of Annihilation, but you can get Flame Guards and put threat on that. Or you can go get 2 sets of Dreadnought gloves. They're not unique. You can have multiple pieces of tier 3. You can have 2 separate tier 3 boots. One with speed on them and one with stamina. Or one with agility, one with stamina. And swap them out for different fights. There's not a lot of people that I know that do that, but it is possible to do. I know some folks that have double Conqueror's Crown, and then they put tanking enchants on one of them, and then they put DPS enchants on the other one. I've thought about doing that. I've never really done that before, but that's something you could do with gloves as well. You could have or you could have threat on your mitigation set, and then agility on your threat set, or vice versa. But I don't think the difference in threat per second is large enough. Like, so it was 1160 and now we're at 1145, right? So let's say we stick with this. We're at 6% hit. We got Circle of Applied Force and Quick Strike Ring. Like, let's just change Quick Strike Ring. Let's see how much of a difference it is to change a ring out. Trying to think of what a lesser ring would be. Signet of Unyielding Strength. Let's put that on. That's the ring from ZG. Pretty sure that has a crit on it still. Crit attack power, maybe. So we're at 1145. So we went down by 6. So just changing that one ring out, which the rings are not terribly different. The Signet of Unyielding Strength, I believe, is attack power. It's strength, stamina, and crit, and that's pretty much what Quick Strike Ring is. It just has more of those stats. It has more strength, and it has a flat attack power. So that was a 6 threat per second difference and the enchant was a 15 threat per second difference. So, it's not like you're changing the world by putting that enchant on. Go back to quick strike rating. I would change out with a ring with hit on it and go, but these sims are going to overvalue hit, so it's probably going to make it even worse. Let's say Blackstone ring. Actually, let's get it back to baseline. So what was it? Applied force. This is what, 1145, I think. Let's get back to 1145 and see how big of a drop it would be. It's probably going to go up because it's got hit on it. It's 1145 even there. Let's change out Kiss of the Spider and say Blackhand's Breath. Blackhand's Breath is really good, but that dropped our hit down to 5. That's probably going to drop like a rock. Yeah, look at that. Almost 40 threat per second just by not having Kiss of the Spider versus Blackhand's Breath. So that is, that's like 3 times as much of an impact on your threat. Which is funny because actually I don't have Kiss of the Spider yet. I still have Blackhand's Breath. So when I end up getting Kiss of the Spider, I'm going to get a 3 times bigger bump to my overall threat per second than if I change enchants to threat instead of agility. Where did it go? Kiss of the Spider. So I'll put this link in the description, and you can play around with, this is what I use this for primarily, is just to play around with different things, see how, how much different will it be. Okay, we're back at 11:45. Like, there was a conversation the other day that I was having with somebody about, Soul String versus, what's the bow from? What is that? Burst? What is that? I've never even seen that before. Nubian Slave Maker. So Soul String is 1% crit. I think it's 6 stamina and like 20 attack power. Or 22 attack power. And then Nubian Slave Maker drops off Kel'Thuzad. And it doesn't have any stamina. It has 1% crit, and then it's like 26 attack power. So like, let's see how much. This is technically Biss, but it doesn't have any stamina on it. So I'm at 11:45. I'm gonna guess that it's gonna go up to like 11:49 or 11:48, or it's gonna be less than 5, I think. $11.47. It went up 2 threat per second. When you're doing 1100 threat per second, 2 threat per second is nothing. So during the discussion, I was basically saying, I don't really want Nerubian Slave Maker. I would rather that DPS warriors get it and rogues and other folks that it's, because I don't necessarily think that that's Biss for Fury Prot. I mean, technically speaking, it is, but you're giving up that stamina, so it's kind of a wash. And there's other things I would rather have, than Nerubian Slave Maker. You don't like Kiss of the Spider. You want to make 30 and 40 and 50 threat per second jumps. You don't want to make 5 threat per second jumps when you're upgrading your gear. So it's, same thing with enchants. I use dodge on my cloak. Let's get this back to 11:45. I've had people say, why don't you put agility on there? Because it's 3 agility. It's for threat. Yeah, it's probably better, but 1% dodge. Okay, now this number is always going to be slightly different every time you run it because it's doing all those different iterations. It's still right at 11:45. Let's change my dodge to lesser agility, which is 3 agility on your cloak. It's probably going to go from 11:45 to 11:45 and a half. 11:46 and a half. So technically, if you're going for complete max threat, these are probably this is probably not the right enchant. You probably want the eight strength. You know, you're gonna want it, but then again, Fury Prot is not about max threat. It's about a balance. You have to balance out. You don't want to die in 2 swings. You're worthless to your raid. So you don't want to be wearing the absolute best threat gear because you're not going to have any avoidance and any mitigation or any stamina. And you can make up stamina with world buffs and consumes. It's possible to wear gear like this and have I'm at 346 defense in this gear set, which is not a ton. It's not nothing, but it's not a ton either when you're fighting against a boss. I think in this set, when I'm in Nax and with all my consumes and everything, I'm just shy of 11,000 hit points. I've died to Fairlena before. I've died to Noth before. Like, I've died to bosses that are considered weak, because you can just get unlucky and get a crit and a crush, or the melee or parrying. They're standing in the front, the boss is getting parried, whatever, and you just get bursted down. Having dodge, it's hard to quantify 20% dodge. It's hard to look at logs and go see where you dodged and then say, if I had 19 instead of 20, I wouldn't have dodged that. You have no way of knowing that. But you're still stacking the odds in your favor, just like you do when you're adding more crit. You're increasing the likelihood that you're going to have a string of crits and your threat is going to go through the roof, and then you can kind of take it easy and pay more attention to positioning or putting on a shield or using a cooldown or whatever the other 9,000 things you got to be doing as a tank. You don't always want to be riding right on that line. And that's another thing, if you have all of the absolute best threat gear and all the absolute best buffs and consumes, go back and look at your threat, and analyze your threat on those fights. No, there's times that I look at fights like for Fairlena, for example, or let's not use Fairlena because she can hit you hard in a couple instances, like Noth, or any of the other caster bosses that just don't really hit that hard. There's instances where I've made gearing decisions to change my gear out because I went back and looked and the mages had a crazy ignite building and they still weren't keeping up with me. And the Fury Warriors were all blowing Death Wish and they still weren't keeping up with me. So in that instance, I'm like, well, I'm wearing way too much threat gear. If I'm, it's possible to get unlucky right off in the pool and get a parry and a dodge and all that stuff. But as an average, if you're looking at your threat and I don't have one ready to pull up, but I've done them in other videos. You can pull up a threat analysis tool and look at your threat for specific fights on Warcraft logs. And if you're miles above the next person, there's no reason for that. Especially if you're not then putting on a shield. Patchwork main tanking is probably the best example I can think of that. Actually, let's go do that real quick. I always say real quick and then the video ends up being an hour and a half long. So I'm going to go backwards a little bit because I'm going to go back another week. Let's check this one. Pretty sure I main tanked him this week. Yeah, so you see this tank took Hatefuls, I took melee, this tank took Hatefuls. Pardon me. So I'm filtering out myself. If you're not familiar with how Warcraft logs works, I'm not going to go into great depth here with it. So here's what I'm wearing. I'm wearing Dreadnought helmet. This is basically this is not completely mitigation, but it's very mit heavy. Dreadnought helm, Pen of the Karaji Guardian, Conqueror Spalders, Dreadnought breastplate, Girdle the Mentor, Conquerors, Dreadnought, Gauntlets of Might, because I still don't have Goas. Gauntlets of Might are very good for fights like this. Plus, I need the hit in this gear setup because I don't have a DFT yet, and I don't have the cloak off a noob yet. Angelisa's Touch, Ring of the Dreadnought, Mark of the Champion because he's undead, Slayer's Crest, Sandstorm Cloak, I don't have the noob cloak yet. That's why. Thunder Fury, Hunger and Cold. I do not put on a shield on that. When I'm main tanking Patchwork, if you're soaking Patchwork, use a shield. If you're main tanking Patchwork, you need to start off dual wielding and then you can put on a shield as needed. And then I got Soul String. So that's the gear I've got. So I can add it up real quick, but I'm going to tell you, I know I've already got 6% hit. I don't know all my exact stats. So there is 1% hit on these shoulders. Chest plate is 2%, so that's 3%. Girdle of the Mentor has 1%, so that's 4%. Legs have 1%, so that's 5. No hit there. No hit there. Gauntlets of Might, that's 1%, that's 6% hit. Nothing on that ring, nothing on that ring. Mark of the Champion, no hit. No hit on Slayers, no hit on Sandstorm, no hit on my weapons. No hit. So I've got 6% hit. Right? Now let's go look at damage done. I did 1,000 DPS, just barely over 1,000 DPS. My main ability, as you can see, is Heroic Strike. And this is really good. So like, this was for, when was this? This was July 25th. Today is August 20th. This was just about a month ago. This was a 99 parse, I'm pretty sure. A 98 parse. I barely missed it. Okay. It's very easy to parse on Patchwork because most tanks don't go for threat. They, even when they main tank, and Patchwork doesn't hit that hard. Like, let's look at damage taken real quick. Like, the overall damage we took, like, Hateful Strikes hit so much harder. So I'm taking regular melee hits. Okay, the maximum he hit me was 3k on a regular hit. The average was 2k. So he's averaging 2,000, but he's hitting me every like second. And then he crit me once, it looks like, and then I blocked because I don't put on a shield till usually the very end. So he does not hit that hard. 2k is really not that bad. If you go to the events though and look at the timeline, so 6.6 seconds, and then less than a second later he swung, and then less than a second later he swung. So he's swinging on about a 1 second swing timer. So it's 2k every second as an average. You can see right here, he was hitting me a little. This is probably before Demo Shout got up, and then Demo Shout got up and it dropped his damage a little bit. And then obviously you're going to dodge and parry and miss in there, and that's going to drop the average down. So actually he hits me for less than that. But then, so now if you want to look at your threat, this is what you do. There's an add-on. I can't remember what it's called. It's an extension. WCL, Warcraft Logs Threat Link. Link Warcraft Logs to TBCC Threat Graph. So you need to get that. And then what it does is it puts this threat graph button up here. So I'm going to open in a new window. And it opens this other website. Now, it automatically imports your report ID. I'm going to say, I want to look at Patchwork. Patchwork, hit fetch. And then it's going to, you got to pick Patchwork again out of here. Okay, so this is your threat graph. This is the entire raid's threat graphed out. Look, this is me. And it shows every ability you cast, how much threat it was worth, what your total cumulative threat was at that point. Nobody is even remotely close. This warrior is one of the off tanks who has a shield on. Those tanks are never going to catch you if you're dual wielding. So I could have put a shield on. This fight lasted almost exactly 2 minutes. So almost exactly 120 seconds. I could have put a shield on 40 seconds in and probably been fine. The reason I didn't is because sometimes it takes a while for that ignite to build, and then you'll see a mage just start catching up and riding right underneath of you. But even with all that mitigation gear on, I can wear more. So if we go back to my summary, so like I could swap this belt. I could, if I don't have the belt from AQ20, or AQ40. There's an AQ40 belt that is mitigation, more of a mitigation belt. Drops off twins. I could put that on. I'd have to make up the hit somewhere else. Really, the reason you're doing so much threat on this fight is because, for one, you're dual wielding, and for two, There's actually three reasons. One is I'm dual wielding. Um, Two is I have. Actually, there's more than that. Let's just run through all the reasons. I'm dual wielding, first of all. I don't stop dual wielding until he enrages, which is probably right around here. You kind of can see my threat kind of plateau, like it's going up, 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 and then it like stops right there. Right around there is probably where I put a shield on, and then I hit shield block, and you know, I can just quit doing stuff because no one's catching me. So I have world buffs. I'm dual wielding. I'm getting hit a ton. Even though he's not hitting me for a ton of damage, he's hitting me every second. Every second I have rage coming in. So you are going to basically be rage capped as a main tank on this fight. You are not going to be able to spend rage quick enough. And that's another reason why you see Heroic Strike. I cast it 82 times. So I'm using Thunder Fury in the main hand, and I have Hungering Cold as the offhand. So Hungering Cold is 1.5 speed versus Thunder Fury is 1.9. And I almost cast Heroic Strike as much as my melee got cast. Bloodthirst 18, that's obviously cooldown based, and then Revenge is proc based 18. And then Thunder Fury is just random Casino Sword, so it procs whenever it feels like procking. But you're casting Heroic Strike non-stop. Yeah, I missed my offhand twice. That means I only missed Heroic Strike Q twice, and I was probably doing something else at that. That's probably melee hits right at the end or something. I don't know. So I'm dual wielding. I've got world buffs. So let's real quick just to look at buffs. I got Fengus Ferocity, Songflower Rend. I popped Slayer's Crest, which is my trinket. Moldor's Moxie Songflower. Rallying Cry. The Dragon Slayer had all world buffs, right? And also, you know, wearing this gear, it's not like you're completely gimping your damage. These still have strength on them. A lot of these pieces have no agility, but they do have a little bit of strength. Like Dreadnought Breastplate has 21 strength. That's not a ton of strength. I think Conqueror's has 34 or something like that. A-Bomb Ribcage, I think, has 45. So double the strength. But you're not completely gimping yourself, you know. Putting on a shield is when you really gimp your output. So I've got basically unlimited rage. It's basically like the Veil fight. Dual wielding, and I've got world buffs, full world buffs, every world buff you can get, and I've got consumes on. And the other thing is that I move. So if you look at my misses, there's one dodge of Heroic Strike, 0 parries. There's 2 parries of melee, but 5 dodges, 2 misses. No parries of Bloodthirst. No misses at all for Revenge. So, like, he should have parried me a lot more. The reason he doesn't is because I move into a position where he cannot parry me. So if you go and look at other warriors that fight Patchwork, and you see a bunch of parries on the main tank, it's because they're not. So, like, let's look at Ort real quick. So he got parried 12 times on Heroic Strike. So he has the off tanks, the soakers have no choice. Patchwork faces he does not face the main tank. When you pull him, he runs at the main tank. You start attacking him, and then the soaker tanks are standing on top of you. As soon as he gets to you, they rotate over to the left, and when they do that, he follows them. He turns with them. He will melee the main tank, but he will not face the main tank. He faces whoever he's hateful striking. So the off tanks have no option to not get parried. But you can see like how I got parried 0 times on Heroic Strike. He got parried 12. Bloodthirst, he got parried 5. I had 0. Melee, I had 2. Looks like he's got 2, but that's probably because he really didn't melee because he's using a one-hander. My melee parries were probably during the pull. So that increases your threat by a lot, as you can imagine. So, imagine if I had, out of these 82 casts, I hit 81 times because he dodged once. Now let's imagine that 5 more of those are gone, or 6 more, or 7 more, because they got parried. And then Bloodthirst, 18 times it was cast, it landed 17 times. He dodged once. What if he would have parried 3 of those? Then this would have gone down to 14. It really starts gimping your threat, when you're not positioned properly on Patchwork. So this is a fight where you can, analyze your performance and look and see, look at your position, look at what you're wearing. That's why I can wear all this mitigation, and I can add more mitigation and still not be in danger of losing threat. And you can do that on other fights as well. Obviously, you can't avoid parries on other bosses, but this is a very handy tool to go back and look at your historical and see, because the mages, and if you look here, you can see ignite. The way that Warcraft Logs looks at damage, so if you go to damage done, and then if you don't filter me, it puts all the mages basically are together. So it's showing that Ed did more damage, even though according to this, DD is the one that had the ignite. So on Warcraft Logs, it spreads the ignite damage among all the mages that were there. So that's why there's not one mage that's way up above everybody else. It splits that damage out. But in the real world, when you're actually looking at the threat meter, you're going to see one mage's name coming up, and they're the ones that quote unquote own the ignite. And when you're looking at this is a good way of seeing. So like we could even look at another fight. Like Thaddeus is a good fight to look at. Let's look at Thaddeus. Fetch, refresh. Thaddeus. Okay, let's close this. Let's do it this way. Because Thaddeus is a fight where... Am I blind? Oh, there he is. Thaddeus is a fight where Ignite does insane damage. It's going to look the same for some reason. So if you look here, I don't know why that drops through the floor. Maybe I think he got bopped. I've never really looked at this for Thaddeus before. I wonder if it's like this because he doesn't engage until the other two are dead. And it's like shrinking the graph. There we go. That's a little bit better. So what happens is that you see there's a couple of tanks, and we're taunting off of each other, and you can see we keep passing each other up. Well, then the mage, get in here. So Ed had an ignite, and look at the threat on that thing, and then he either got bopped, or he petried, or he lipped, or he did something, and he dropped off the threat. Then he immediately comes right back up, but he never catches back up to us. So there's really nothing you can do on Thaddeus about that. You just have to keep taunting off the mage. But you can see how this is useful to see, like let's look at Maxna. I don't think mages have a he did get passed up. So Maxna. So Ort was tanking. I didn't tank Maxna this week, but you can see and Ed might have lipped there. I don't really know. I'd have to go back and look at the logs. But that's another thing you can do is you can use this tool to see, oh, the mage was catching me. Right here, maybe I save my trinket, or I don't know, whatever, do something. You don't want to blow Death Wish on her before she wraps. But you can look, here's 30 seconds. So then you can go to Warcraft Logs, look at 30 seconds, and then see, did Ed quit casting? Like what? It looks like he just kept on rolling. Because they do have to pass you up. It's not once they pass 101% of your threat, they take aggro. He's got to be, I think it's 130% or more, since he's ranged. And you see Orc caught right back up to him. So I don't think he was ever really in danger. But the mages always know to lip or get a bop or whatever. Anyway. I don't think there's any other... I don't think a Nubricon lasts long enough for the mages to build Ignite. Yeah, not even close. Like, Ort was 10 miles away. So this is another good example. A Nubricon doesn't hit hard. I think we used to wreck on him, and we don't anymore. But you know, if this was me, I would look at this and say, well, he doesn't hit hard, and I'm not in danger of dying because he doesn't hit hard, and the healer, it's a 30-second fight, I think. Let's look. Oh, 45. This is a 45-second fight? Okay. That's probably because we don't wreck on him anymore. Yeah, it splits the mage damage up, so it's hard to see that the mage with the ignite would really be up there. But I would probably look at this and say, you know, I wouldn't look at just 1 week. I'd look at multiple weeks and say I could probably drop my threat down. You know, I could probably wear other pieces of gear just to give the healers, you know, an easier time. So I'll put this in the description. But yeah, when you're talking about threat versus agility, in my opinion, I think you should go agility, and I think you could look at you know, your threat elsewhere. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one.